Let me take you straight into the chaos of that day. It was one of those events you wouldn't believe if you hadn't seen it yourself. The mess hall at Fort Duncan was alive with laughter, the sharp, metallic kind that cuts through the air. Major Alex Stone, standing tall like a seasoned veteran, pointed at me and spoke loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "Girls should stick to playing with dolls," he said, as if it were the most obvious truth in the world, "not fantasizing about weapons they'll never touch." The crowd burst into laughter, the kind where everyone's uncomfortable but too proud to speak up. What Major Stone didn't know, what no one in that room could have guessed, was that what he called childish fantasies weren't just dreams. Sure, I was only 12 years old, and maybe I looked like any other military brat, trailing behind my father, clutching my worn-out leather case, trying to fade into the early morning mist rolling in from the hills. But there was something different about me, something that had come from my mother, Captain Sarah Taylor. The Army had called her one of the most skilled sharpshooters they had, though a lot of her career was still classified, even after her memorial. Since I was 7, Mom had taught me in secret, gently and patiently, always with that gold star pendant hanging from her neck. She'd shown me how to hold a rifle, how to breathe, and how to take the shot when it mattered. Most people assumed I was quiet because I'd lost her too soon. The truth? Every step I took on that base was a way to keep her memory alive. That day, I finally gathered the courage to ask permission to use the range where her record still stood. My father, Luke Taylor, a retired officer turned maintenance supervisor, was uneasy as we walked toward the mess hall. He was proud of me, always had been, but he knew all too well how quickly things could go sideways if you stepped on the wrong toes. "Remember what we talked about?" he said as we neared the hall, his voice low, a mix of warning and reassurance. "Not everyone's going to get why you want to use that range today." I held my mother's pendant tightly in my hand, thinking of her. She would have said, "Skills fade if you don't keep them sharp." The hall buzzed with the energy that only military folk can create, that halfway point between training and routine. Old photos hung on the walls, alongside nautical relics and anchors. The coffee was strong enough to wake the dead. Major Stone, surrounded by a few of his colleagues, was bragging loudly about his golf game, his voice bouncing off the walls with that easy arrogance that comes from giving orders for too long. I wandered over to a display case, filled with dusty medals and faded letters, mementos of the past, when I felt his eyes on me. Major Stone's demeanor shifted instantly from playful to military dominant. "Well, look what we have here," he boomed, his voice now a command. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward me. My cheeks burned, but I remembered what Mom had taught me. Never look away from a bully. "Yes, sir," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know where I am." I stood still, waiting for Dad to finish his conversation. Stone wasn't done. "What's in that case, sweetheart?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "A rifle? Or is it just your little doll collection?" The room fell even quieter, and I saw Dad notice what was happening. He moved toward us, but not fast enough. "It's not a toy, sir," I answered firmly. "It's my shooting kit." You might think that would have ended things, but Stone's smile grew colder than the morning fog. "A shooting kit? And let me guess, your dad lets you play with real weapons too." Before I could respond, Dad arrived at my side, his stance tense. "Colonel, I think there's a misunderstanding," he said, looking at Stone's uniform, a clear indication of what he thought about civilians. "Misunderstanding? Your daughter is talking about weapons in an officer's mess hall. That's not appropriate, and it reflects badly on military families." The challenge hung in the air. Dad needed his job, but he wasn't going to let Stone humiliate me. "Penelope has been trained in firearms safety and marksmanship," he said, looking Stone in the eye. "Her mother was Captain Sarah Taylor." Stone snorted. "Never heard of her. What did she do? Administrative work?" The word stung, an insult to Mom's legacy. "I'll tell you who she was," I said quietly, but with certainty. "She was a sniper in the Army. And she taught me everything." The room shifted slightly, the air growing heavier. That's when Sergeant Major Alice Hayes, who ran the local range, stood up from her seat and approached us. Her expression was all business, but her eyes were curious. Is there something I can help with? She asked. Stone, clearly annoyed that his audience was starting to slip away, growled, "This little girl says her mother was some kind of sniper and that she's been trained. I'm just explaining how kids shouldn't make up stories." Sergeant Major Hayes, unfazed, turned to me. "Miss Taylor, what kind of training have you had?" I began to recite everything Mom had taught me, the basics of safety, breathing control, trigger squeeze. Hayes nodded, impressed. Then she asked about the weapons I'd used. "Mostly bolt-action rifles, ma'am," I said. "And some semi-autos." Mom always said consistency matters more than variety. Just then, Chief Instructor Emma Cross, one of the best on the West Coast, walked in. She took one look at me and the way I held myself, then said, "Captain Sarah Taylor. Best natural shot I ever worked with." My heart jumped. Someone who knew Mom, who respected her. Stone looked rattled, but he didn't back down. "You're suggesting we let a 12-year-old shoot on a military range?" Hayes spoke, her voice as sharp as a scalpel. "If Miss Taylor has the proper training, there's no regulation against her using the range under supervision." Before Stone could object again, I spoke up louder than I ever had before. "If you don't believe me, Colonel, I'll show you." His face lit up with a smug grin. "Now that's an excellent idea. Let's see what a little girl can do with a real rifle." Captain Hayes insisted on full safety checks, which Stone reluctantly agreed to, clearly thinking he was setting me up for failure. As we walked to the range, others gathered: Sergeant Quinn, a recent range master, Lieutenant Johnson from Special Forces, and several other curious onlookers. The range stretched out across the hills, with targets as far as 800 meters. Chief Cross leaned in close, explaining wind mirage and environmental factors without any baby talk. "Mom taught me about mirage and heat shimmer," I said. "It's the conditions that matter more than the gear." When we reached the firing line, Sergeant Anderson ran me through the safety checks. I passed with no hesitation. Dr. Pierce, the range's psychologist, came by to observe my stress response. Major Stone rolled his eyes, but the crowd had started to take notice. "This is military-grade equipment," someone whispered, eyeing my rifle. "You can't get this at a sporting goods store." Captain Hayes set up a basic 25-meter target. "5 shots, prone," she said. The silence was thick as I settled behind the rifle, focusing on my breathing, aligning my sight. The first shot, dead center. Stone scoffed, "Beginner's luck." So, Hayes asked for a full qualification string, 5 rounds, tighter than ever. The murmurs in the crowd grew. Lieutenant Johnson said, "That's not luck, that's skill." But Stone, sweating now, demanded I shoot at 300 meters. It was a big jump, but I wasn't backing down. I looked at Dad, who whispered, "You don't have to prove anything." But I wanted to show them what Mom had taught me. At 300 meters, Lieutenant Johnson handed me a bolt-action rifle with a variable scope. "Do you need time to adjust?" he asked. I didn't. I made the necessary adjustments, just like Mom taught me, and settled into position. For the first time that day, I felt calm. "Range is clear," Captain Hayes announced. My breathing slowed, and with steady hands, I squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed in the silence. "Bullseye," Sergeant Anderson called out. Stone demanded I repeat the shot. 5 more rounds, all within an inch and a half. The crowd was stunned. Dr. Pierce, eyes wide, asked, "How do you stay so calm?" I smiled, thinking of Mom. Focus on the process, not the result. The pressure disappears. That's when things got interesting. Helicopters thundered overhead, and soon Admiral Lila Reed stepped out, her silver hair gleaming, her gaze sharp. She listened to the reports, looked at my targets, then turned to me. "Would you be interested in advanced training?" she asked. I didn't know how to respond. This had all started as a tribute to Mom, not as a job offer. But then came the twist. Admiral Reed pulled out a photograph, showing a woman in military uniform, medals I didn't recognize, but the face, it was unmistakable. "That's your grandmother," she said. My heart stopped. Mom had always told me her parents had died young. But Admiral Reed explained that my grandmother, Chief Warrant Officer Rachel Taylor, had faked her death for a covert mission. She had been watching me from afar, keeping me safe. Minutes later, another helicopter arrived, and out stepped a woman who moved with the same quiet confidence I had seen in my mother's old videos. She embraced me, her voice shaking. "You look just like your mother. And you shoot better than I did at your age." In that moment, all those years apart seemed to vanish. The officers, the crowd, even Major Stone, didn't know what to say. He tried to apologize, but my grandmother silenced him with one look. "Her skills speak for themselves," she said. "Don't let your assumptions cloud your judgment next time." Admiral Reed turned to the room. "What should we do with talent like this? Should we nurture it or let it fade?" The room was still, but I knew they were all thinking about it, about the cost of service, the meaning of family, what respect truly looks like. So, let me ask you, this isn't just my story anymore. What do you think? How should we honor sacrifice and talent? What's right and what's wrong? Drop a comment. Let's hear your take. This story isn't over. Not by a long shot.